Hello and welcome to Diamond Mothering with Carolyn and Lisa.
Welcome back, everyone. Wonderful to have you here again. And we're delighted to have the amazing Grainne O Kane with us today. Grainne's been on with us before, telling us her stories from Wellbeing Training. But we've particularly asked Grainne on today to talk about a topic that's really, really important for the work that myself and Lisa are doing in the world, which is around the mother ring and building that beautiful connection between the mother and daughter, because as we know, that all of our attachments are, based on this, beautiful connection that we can build, and it's like this gorgeous bridge of intimacy that can be created between, the mother and daughter dynamic that can really improve the relationship. And sometimes the problems that are in those dynamics are based in kind of the foundation of our own relationships from our childhood. And within the Rainbow Warrior Women's Group, Grainne had done a talk with me a good few months ago, which was so enlightening, and about the attachment styles of how we were securely or insecurely attached to our parents when we were kids, and then how we create that as a pattern in our life, in our intimate relationships going forward. So we just thought it'd be amazing to ask Grainne on to talk about a little bit more about that and to explain to people what the attachment styles are, first of all, Grainne, and then what are the different attachment styles, so people can maybe, when they're listening to us, try to identify maybe how they're showing up and what attachment style they might see as a pattern in their own relationship with their daughter. Be amazing, Grainne.
Yeah, thanks Lisa, thanks Caroline for having me. Sorry about all the shifting around. I just realized I was in high heels because I was in a meeting and I'm sitting there and I'm like, going, why am I sitting in high heels? And you'll just click clack. So in terms of attachment styles, I suppose Bowlby and Ainsworth developed attachment theory in the mid-20th century, and they primarily at that time were focusing on primary caregivers, which were mothers at that time. That's the group that they were looking at, and their infants, really 0 to 18 months and 18 months to 3. But there's a huge wealth of material in attachment theory that builds upon that, right? So what they developed, and I suppose what they interpreted at that time, was 3 predominant attachment styles. So that's secure, and then 2 others which are insecure avoidant and insecure anxious. And I suppose since we've moved on from that, there's then a disorganized attachment style, which we can talk about later as well. But they're the 3 primary ones. So if we look at it kind of like from a mother-infant kind of angle, what that looks like is a secure attachment style. And again, it's really to highlight to mothers or whoever's listening that this doesn't mean, as the primary caregiver or as the mother, that your child doesn't have a secure attachment style because of something you did, right? I think, because we know, if we look at kind of other data and other research and the spiritual realm as well, and we see how trauma is transferred and epigenetics as well. So, mothers are always the default and guilt, and it's their fault that their child has an insecure attachment style, and that's not the case. So I'll try and explain it from that context. So the secure attachment style is the baby that is distressed or upset, cries, and the mother can read the cue that they're going to cry or read the cue that they're distressed, and is able to soothe or support that baby soothe themselves. That's the basic bones of what secure attachment style is, right? Insecure attachment style is the baby that is distressed and cries and cries beyond what the issue actually is. You know the kids or the babies that you're kind of going like, Jesus Christ, like I thought you liked chicken nuggets. I didn't mean to put a fish finger on the plate. You know, so it's that really kind of this is beyond what the situation is. That's an insecure attachment style. They do end up soothed by their primary caregiver, but it takes longer. The regulation is slower, and they're not always fully back in a calm situation. And the insecure avoidant looks fine. They're not really showing signs of distress. They're not crying the way other babies and toddlers are. They're kind of like, they look fine with it. But the research shows that at a physiological level, they have all the stress indicators. They're just not communicating them. So what this looks like then as you kind of progress in your life. So on the one hand, it's really to kind of give mothers permission that they did nothing wrong. You could just be that way.
Yeah, and do you think that's maybe inherent, that something maybe came, they're born in that kind of personality, you say, epigenetics, or it's just something that's inherent in them, born, the way when a child is born, you get this flavor from them of their essence, like they're so different, each child is so different when they come. And so it's an inherent kind of trait nearly sometimes.
Yeah. I think you have that blend of like, we're trying to understand the different elements. So say, for example, I've spoken before about being adopted. So being adopted, like it's an excellent example for attachment theory, because you're going, here you were with your primary caregiver that you knew from a womb level and been born in the mountain laundries where there was no touch. So there's nobody reading your cues or responding to you or meeting your needs if you're crying or distressed or anything like that. So obviously I'm going to end up with an insecure avoidant attachment style, because it's like, yeah, I'm stressed out here. No one's ever going to come. That's what you learn in your first few months of life. So you move on with that, right?
That's your kind of default then. Yeah.
That can become your default. However, for example, I've 5 children, as you know, and all of them came into the world very differently. So my daughter, for example, would present as having an insecure, avoidant attachment style. Is that epigenetics? Is that distress levels from being in childcare? Is that partly personality type? Sometimes we don't have the root of the why, but it's relevant to know what is your attachment style in specific relationships, because that's kind of the next layer to it, to go, if I was working with somebody or delivering training, I'd be saying, right, you write down every person you know, or like at least the top 10, and then you define what that relationship is. So it's mother-daughter, or my daughter or my mother, or my partner, or colleagues at work, or a friend or a neighbor. And then you rate how important it is to you, 0 to 10, and then you rate how stressful it is to you. Because it's the stressors that link to our attachment style. And then, as a kind of a practice moving forward, you'd be saying, what priority areas in this relationship would you name that you could improve on for yourself? So everything that's based in the attachment theory is really about working towards having secure, satisfying, intimate relationships, and not necessarily romantic. Intimate, it's mother-daughter, it's friends, it's whatever, but it's to have secure and satisfying and intimate relationships. And if you have insecure avoidant or insecure anxious attachment styles, it's much harder to do that, because you don't feel secure, you don't feel safe in the relationships. So there's all sorts of other behaviors that present, because I suppose, like anything, we are all individually always trying to get our own needs met. So if you're insecure avoidant, you're going to be testing. Are people going to show up? Are they going to be there? They're always going to let you down. They're never going to be around. They can't fix my problems anyways. No one can save you, so you're going to test that in every relationship. If you're insecure avoidant, they'll be the ones that are like, text bombing you all the time. They're constant need of attention because they're and then the pattern is, like, I suppose they get the dopamine hit from that because they're getting attention, then you have to soothe, so in the mother-daughter dynamic, they're very, very, very needy, but it can, from a mother's point of view, it can feel very, very manipulative. So you're trying to have an awareness of, that's my attachment style. Always work from yourself first. Read, that's possibly their attachment style, and how can I help them within that? And helping somebody within that isn't actually enabling their unhealthy behaviors linked to their attachment style.
Do you find that it's mostly like naming it and bringing the awareness to that, like in a relationship, the more, like, I've just discovered myself not knowing a lot about attachment styles, but actually naming a dynamic that I might have and being able to step back and with my partner say, oh, wow, actually, can you see how I've reacted because of blah, 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 which is one of my default things, but actually being able to name the dynamic and see it. Do you think that is really helpful when it comes to also working with attachment styles?
Yeah, Lisa, I think that's it. I think that's the magic, because if you're looking at yourself and going, oh, I did that, or I'm thinking that, or I was triggered that, because ultimately I feel unsafe right now, or I feel insecure, and that's the attachment style I have in this relationship. So, like, Bowlby and Ainsworth and the mid-20th century theorists around it really looked at those early years. But, there's other attachment theorists, and if we think about it, I suppose I'm coming at it from a teen mental health point of view, and we spoke about this before, that so much changes in the adolescent years. Like, it's a huge transition, and their priority is about peer acceptance and peer approval. So they may have a secure attachment style with their mother. They may not in their peer group. And sometimes that's just coincidental. They might have ended up in a group that just doesn't really get them, or isn't really got their vibe, or they don't have the same interest, but they have to do what it takes to fit in, because school is survival of the fittest. So that can change their attachment style, and certainly in friendship groups as well. And then, trauma happens, and that can descale everything. Yeah.
Wow. I was doing some reading on it the other day, and I found it very interesting, because some of the things that were said were like, if you have a child that has a parent, and like both parents, they bicker a lot, and one of them's right and one of them's wrong, and the parents are always fighting. It's like the child gets really confused, and they want to support this one, and they want to support that one, and they want to support this one. And so they've discovered that adults that find it hard to make a decision may have been the result of parents that fight a lot. It's because the child was never able to actually feel settled and secure in the attachment, because they were always being drawn to either parent. And I thought, wow, like, even just looking at it from that perspective, I thought I could understand how that could happen to somebody.
Yeah, because like it like, all of this stuff I find fascinating, because it's not linear. As our adults, as adults, and I suppose with our prefrontal cortex, we're trying to make things linear and logical. But when you look at it through the eyes of the child and those developing years, like right up until like 16, 17, and even beyond, and they don't have the prefrontal cortex. So their processing of the world is really crude, So and it all boils down to, how can I feel safe? How can I feel contained? And contained doesn't mean control. Containment means safe in myself, in my growth, and safe to do so without control or without oppression in any way, because people mix containment with control. But and like, as parents of, I suppose I do the talk on the adverse childhood experience of parental separation, and the biggest thing that adults, I suppose, who've come through as children of separation say is, like, the biggest thing is the parental conflict. Not necessarily even in the marriage, but the years ensuing afterwards, and that unsettling and that not knowing. And I know from my own personal experience, my son Brian's turning 16 in June, and kind of going through, what you want to do for your birthday. I would be a planner anyways, but particularly when you're separated, you kind of have to have all your ducks in a row and be middle management and all that sort of stuff. And he's like, "Oh, I just want to have a party with my friends." And I'm like, "Well, no, because we have a zero tolerance for alcohol, but and have a meal, the 7 of us. So his 4 siblings and his mom and his dad, not his mom's partner, not his dad's partner." And I was like, "Okay, if that's what you want, that's no problem," because children of separation, they have dad family and they have mom family, and then they have their family of origin. But then he came back about 24 hours later and he was like, "Actually, we'll just do us. We'll just do yous, and then I'll do dad's when I'm at dad's." And I was like, "Okay, whatever you want. Can I ask you like why you want that?" And he's like, "Oh, if the 7 of us go, dad and Tara, my daughter, will just gang up on you and start picking at you, and I'll feel that I have to stick up for you." And he's like, "It's not that I don't want to stick up for you, but it's just why be in that situation?" So that's an example actually of a child who has a secure attachment style and is able to go, "I have a secure relationship with him, I have a secure relationship with her, I'm not going to put myself in a situation that's going to put me at risk in any way." But his secure attachment style isn't necessarily a consequence of my parenting or his father's parenting. A lot of that is to do with his personality type as well.
That's amazing. Yeah. And actually, sometimes, I wonder when I hear that, like, it actually reflects a lot with my life as well, because, you asked me on a podcast series to ask me those questions about my own background. And, with my parents, when they broke up when I was 18, and like that, there was 10 years of kind of a lot of conflict, like in the it wasn't a cut and dry kind of separation, we'll say. And it was probably the opposite. But I think there's how you decide to adapt to the situation kind of builds your character as such, so like even like what you're saying about the secure attachments there with your son, he's obviously found a kind of way in that adverse kind of, I suppose, experience to deal with it, the kind of way. So he's had kind of an innate way of maybe having a logical approach to how that would happen. And like I did the same, where I used to always have to kind of have 2 very separate homes, separate experiences, like one separate experience from mom, my dad, and his life. And I really love that. Go to his house, have a great time, with him and his world kind of thing. And then, really enjoy that. And then go to my mom's side and have a brilliant time with her and really enjoy her and who she was, and that's how I navigated it all the time. And then as the years went on, it became healthy that they could both be together. We could all be together. We could enjoy that. But it was more, that was a growth that my parents had to go through, so they could do that, that kind of way. But it was, so like it's amazing like that, I suppose it's an opportunity for growth for the teen as well, like, isn't it, just to find that out about themselves too, I guess too.
Yeah, I think it also shines a light on what our stressors for the children as well, like what's stressor for the parent, for the mother-daughter dynamic, and what's stressor for the daughter, and collapsing into what's your issue and what's their issue. So for example, in Ireland anyways, Lisa, like it's all, exam time coming up. And I suppose there was just a conversation on the radio when I was driving earlier, and I can't even remember the statistics, but the amount of parents that are stressed for their child's exams. And so that anxiety, and we see that a lot, I suppose, in the clinic, and you possibly do as well, Lisa, is like, anxious mom, anxious child. It's very hard for the child not to take on the mother's anxiety, whether it's the child may not, if we use exams as an example, the child may not be stressed actually about their exams, but the child will be anxious and stressed because they don't want to make their mother unhappy. So the intrinsic motivation isn't clear then for the child to go, around where is their value around education and career pathing, or or the steps that takes. I actually had a young boy a couple of weeks ago who had been on the edge of the cliff twice, suicidal, and they weren't really too sure why. And he'd been through some of the child adolescence mental health services here, and they discharged him. And family's still like, we still don't know what to do. Like, suicide's like, and it was really the inability to articulate his emotional overwhelm. That was it. And a lot of the overwhelm was coming from school and not being able to communicate that with his mom. So it was a really easy piece to actually do with him, and then sit down with mom and him and action out, and feel very confident that he's not going to be on the edge of a cliff really ever again, because it was overwhelm that got him there. But mom was anxious about exams and stress and how's he doing and what is he doing, and he's not communicating enough, and so all of that fear that's there. And part of that, as parents, we have our attachment styles to our children, so we have insecure attachment style or insecure avoidance style with our children. So for example, I have a huge difficulty going on with my daughter really at the moment. And I was, triggered and very upset one day. And I was supposed to, on Saturday last weekend, and I was supposed to, I was picking her up from work and dropping her to her father's house. And it was just, bleh. She was just, I'm sure, maybe not every mother has had it, but that venom, that vomit that just comes up at you. And it was like too much for me to bear. And I was supposed to be meeting friends for a bite to eat, and I was just like, actually, I cancelled. I couldn't go, and I really just needed to sit at home with my other kids and feel loved. And that's fine, but I was very aware that was my insecure attachment style, that it was like, oh, I feel so rejected with her, that I needed to feel accepted by them. That was okay once I was aware of it, because if you weren't aware of it, you can end up in very toxic patterns as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so interesting, because I do hear that a lot in the mothers that I work with, especially when girls become teens, the rejection and the hurt, and it's being able to actually navigate that. And what I love about what you said then, Grainne, was that, because like the attachment, I've never really paid much attention to attachment styles. Like, I sort of see the whole picture, and the attachment styles is great to help us understand and bring more awareness, but it's not, I don't put things in boxes, I guess. So I don't, sometimes I feel that people like to go, oh, I am this, therefore that. But what I like about what you said was, we could be like that because we're born like that. It's not necessarily to do with how our parents were. That is a factor. And it's always changing, because as an adult or as a teen, that style in us, like the way we're attaching, can be fluid. And I really like hearing that, because I think that's true. I think that we aren't sort of fixed in stone in any way in our relationships.
Thank God.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, Lisa, but isn't that great news? I think everybody should be like, yeah, it's fluid. It's not fixed in stone. And it could be, I could just be born like that, but I can feel better in myself. I can feel safer. I can feel more empowered. I can, have, and lots of people come that they're looking for closeness, rather than the word necessarily intimacy, because people mix up romantic relationships, but they're not feeling close, and therefore they're not feeling fulfilled in a way. And I agree with you, Lisa, as well. I don't think that's exclusively attachment style. Part of it is that, because people will really lean into something like, so the insecure avoidant, if we're just looking at it from an attachment theory point of view, is going to really lean in tight to a relationship and, give it 200%. And then when that's not reciprocated and their needs aren't been met, they're going to feel, oh, like they don't get me, they don't understand me, this they're not feeling close enough. But part of that is their own insecurity. So when you know, when you work with somebody around their security, then they'll actually feel the closeness that they're so hungry for, you know.
Yeah. And it's like as if, you know, like it's across everything we're talking about, it's all about security. And I think that inner security is the most, I suppose, gives you the most insurance for like all of the relationships within your life. And like creating, like, I love to think, you know, I think I heard, I think it was Thomas Hubel, who I love listening to, talked about one time, and it was so the most hopeful thing I ever heard was that, you know, like security, I suppose, or true relationships, as I talk about, is the healing for false relationships. So like, you know, if you can design and come into a true relationship with one person, or, you know, that heals the false relationship, I suppose. So like when you can kind of grow into a kind of secure relationship with someone, with your daughter or with a partner or whatever, that is the vehicle for kind of healing yourself from the past, you know, your past patterns or whatever, you know. So it is like that fluidity that I absolutely love, that it is like human beings, we are always changing, and we're always growing, and we're always progressing, and there is a healing that can happen, which is, you know, really exciting, you know, that. But it's like Lisa was saying, that all of those, I suppose, attachment styles or patterns that are present in our person, we'll say, always appear in the present moment, in relationship with other people and in relationship with life. So it's how you respond in the moment is the most important thing, isn't it? To have that awareness, self-awareness of what's happening in this moment, like what happened with you at the weekend. You know, there's a power where you can kind of say, oh, I can see what's happening now. I know I'm in touch with my feelings. I'm not disowning my feelings. I'm aware of my feelings. I'm aware of where that's came from. I'm owning it. I'm allowing that to happen. And then I'm just letting that, you know, kind of pass through me, and I move on. Yeah, you know, and I think that's the process, I think, that's really important. And I love, like, especially in Ireland, because it's such an issue in Ireland, you know, emotional processing, you know, like that's why I think so excited about us talking about this and bringing even Lisa talking about it in Ireland, especially because it's a huge societal problem, isn't it, Grainne, you know?
Huge. And I think you've named that so well, that mother-daughter relationship is a healing relationship. Like, what a gift as mothers we have as our daughters, you know? And really talk about holding the mirror up. Like it forces it to heal or to try and fix. And as mothers, what I see a lot is that your daughter can live the life, you know, because you're parenting out of your own mistakes and your own experience and all that sort of stuff. And so you see all the time, parents might come in and go like, no, oh, my child's been bullied and such said that, and they're up in arms, and rightly so. But they're fighting a fight from their childhood. That they're not present in hearing what's going on for the child. How are you equipping the child? How has the child been regulated? What's the environmental influence? Like, none of that's going on. So that's the mother-daughter. It's the healing as well, that you're kind of jumping and going like, I'm healing me. You know, I'm fighting fights that I wanted to have fought for me when I was a child.
Yes.
And I think as mothers, we need to be very aware of that. And as you say, Caroline, to be able to sit in our own emotional healing, to go, oh my God, when this is happening, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, this is what's going on in my body. You know, why is that? What am I learning in this moment? And make it about you first before, you know, you delve into, you know, either fixing the gap, because as mothers, we're so fearful of being rejected, and not even at an emotional level. I think it's so much at a societal level, and the expectations that are on mothers
Yes. Yeah.
You know, like even my daughter would be like, "Oh, I can't believe you said that to me." And I'm like, "Wouldn't you want the perfect mother-daughter relationship?" And I was like, "What is the perfect mother-daughter relationship? There is none. There's this expectation that mothers, daughters now should be like best friends and growing into that." And I'm like, it's still a mother-daughter relationship, and depending on ages and stages, there is a parenting function and boundary and containment aligned with that. And it is an expectation, you know, that romantically for me, like I would have loved that sister relationship that never worked out with my sister. Of course I would love a mother-daughter relationship, and if it happens, that is an alignment for me and for her, great. And if not, it doesn't, because just because there are daughters, there's the family bond doesn't necessarily equate to an alignment around values or friendships or interests. And so therefore it's like, actually as mothers, how empowering are we going to be to allow them fly the nest and discover their true selves in the world? And if we're doing that, then can we accept them for who they are, and are they choosing to accept us for who we are? Because I think a lot has changed in a societal level where mothers are trying to be the mothers their daughters want them to be.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, actually, Grainne, because that is really kind of, to me, kind of the revolution that we're trying to talk about. Because, like, really, like, are we trying to be the perfect mom as such, or have this perfect life, which is actually nothing to do with it? It's some kind of a standard that is not true. You know, it's not true to life. We'll say it's not real. You know, it's a kind of, it's kind of a fantasy, you know. Or are we trying to become true to ourselves, true to our own nature, true to who we are? And the most fundamentally powerful thing anyone can do is to find their own truth, and for that to be supermodeled to the daughter, you know. And like, that is the most powerful thing, because if you're living, and that's what they are picking up on all the time. And I noticed that, like, with my daughter, that's, I think when she was like 12 or 13, I started to kind of use her as my teacher nearly, you know. And I knew she was telling me things. I kind of nearly trust her completely. When I know I'm a bit off, she'll tell me, you know, kind of way. And I'll go, okay, right. Yeah, you're right there. You know, she'd pull me up because she's very outspoken, but we're very different in our characteristics. I'm very calm. She's very fiery, you know, but I can recognize that I need some more of that fieriness to speak up and say things that sometimes I had suppressed, you know, as from a child, from everyday attachment style. And like, she helps me she'll pull me up on that and say, Mom, you should say this, you don't be too quiet about X, Y, and Z. And then I'll help her calm her persona down that's too fiery, and that, you know, it's great to have a voice, but you can't be rude, and you can't be, you know what I mean, push it too far. So like, it's that balance that you're always like, that relationship tries to give, trying to level ourselves out all the time, I think, you know. And that's the really exciting thing. I think that's the revolution, and that's the place where real transformation can happen, you know, and not just with our daughters, but I suppose it helps us to come into our fullness, you know, and the fullness of ourselves in the world, you know. And I think all relationships has the possibility of doing that if we see it like that, you know, how true connection can evolve us, you know.
And it's interesting. So what I'm listening to you, I know I can hear all the animals. There's like the dogs and the cats. It's like this real menagerie tonight. What's really coming up for me after listening to all this is like, because I was thinking, you know, like attachment styles, like I haven't really, it's just not been on my radar, and it just occurred to me why. And I feel like in a lot of the work that I've done on myself, it's always been about feeling, like it's very feeling. I stay out of my head, because I feel that the key for any sort of transformation is actually being able to feel and using the feeling to inform our next moment. So if I have a feeling and I'm trying to analyze it and work it out based on an attachment style, that just wouldn't have worked for me, which is probably why it didn't come into my radar. So, and what I'm hearing from both of you too, it's like the key, even though all of this is wonderful information and can bring awareness, still the key is, in this moment, I'm having a feeling. And in this moment, if I sit with that feeling, rather than go, oh, that's because of, or yeah, that's I'm this or I'm that, or I need to do this. Actually, before we even do that, we have a feeling. What is the feeling? Like, allow the feeling to process and be there. And that discovery of, I'm feeling whatever it is I'm feeling, and looking to learn how to meet that emotional need ourselves, because that then brings us back into a state of empowerment. And from that place, then we can, make adjustments or act or speak or whatever it is. But it's like, just listening to both of you, it's like, okay, so all of that information is great, but coming right down to it, it's like, yeah, let's just learn about our feelings and what we're actually feeling, and feel it for a change, rather than like me, just not even seeing it, like not even noticing it was there.
Well, Lisa, that's secure attachment though. Do you know what I mean? So if you're secure attachment, then you'll go, oh, I'm feeling and I'm entitled to this feeling because I have self-worth. And when you have self-worth, then you can proceed based on your feeling. But somebody with insecure attachment or insecure avoidant will go, what am I feeling? Is it okay to feel like this? No, I shouldn't feel like this. I'm not allowed to feel like that. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that the insecure person, either the insecure anxious or insecure avoidant, it's not that they don't feel the feeling. They will try and repress the feelings because it's so uncomfortable. But it is, as you say, Lisa, it's to connect with that feeling. And and I suppose if it takes you longer to honor your truth, that's okay. Because the insecure avoidant and the insecure attachment anxious is going to take longer to trust the feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that, because actually that I could have experienced that process, I think, definitely over the last number of years, because I think it's down to a lot of our Irish society as well, where we have this guilt thing. So I noticed myself when I was getting in touch with my own feelings, a lot of feelings were coming up, and then the guilt would come in, and I could feel the guilt come in around having a feeling. And then I started aware of, okay, there's guilt coming in every time I have this feeling. Okay, that's okay. So I had to retrain myself to it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to feel the way I'm feeling. There's no issue with that. So there's kind of like, like it's so complex, like, getting in touch with those, that true, your feeling body, your emotional body that we talk about sometimes, Lisa, that, because it's a different part of you completely. Like, you might have your mental state, your mental body, whatever. But the emotional body, it's a sensation in the body. You're entering back into your body, into your whole system as such, and it's very experiential, So like when you start to do the work, and the different feelings start to arise, and it's unusual for you to feel that way if you've been suppressing everything all your life.
Yeah.
And it can be overwhelming, like, you talked about the experiences people have. And if they don't have the kind of education and awareness of how to process that, it can be, I suppose, unsettling, that kind of way. And I think the guidance around that is essential. Like, and especially I think, and different cultures might have different patterns like that. And for Irish society, like, we've had that. So when the feeling, it's even more, it's a complex thing to even understand different cultures. And even when I deal with international students, when I'm working in Griffith College, I notice like there's different feelings, there's different ways of people's, their mindset is different, their way of thinking is different when they come from different cultures. and then that means that they process their emotions in a different way as well. So, you know, it's interesting to kind of understand and get to understand the cultural conditioning along with our emotional world, you know, and how does that kind of, when we start to kind of blossom into ourselves, the different obstacles that are in our way, like, you know, and then how we can become aware of that. It's like that self-awareness around, yeah, the cultural condition, not just our family or, you know, the attachment styles. It's also the larger society that we've gone in, you know, our environment that we've gone into, you know. It's kind of like, you know, that we've been swimming in, that we think is normal, but it's actually not. It's not healthy, you know. It's not a healthy environment, you know. It's not just the family, what society like, you know, and how that has informed how we feel about ourselves, you know, not just our own immediate family. It's when we start to become aware of the larger impact that has, you know. And then I think once we get in tune with that, then we realize like how we can redesign that, and how that's why, you know, it's amazing to be talking about these issues, because I feel of, you know, like the potential to create this kind of conscious culture where when the more people get aware of that, they start to build communities that are based around creating this conscious culture rather than living in this kind of sea of unconsciousness, you know, that it's very conducive for the flourishing of our creativity and our, you know, our connection and our consciousness, I suppose, to have communities and people, you know, that were like-minded to talk about these issues, because it's kind of co-creating that potential for a brighter future, I guess, you know.
Do you think, Grainne, just going back, like, and even listening to what you just said then, Caroline, about considering culture and how that impacts the way we feel, and what you shared before, Grainne, about, so for some people actually getting in touch with the feeling could be harder because of their attachment style. I watched something the other day and they were talking about willingness, and actually you can learn willingness. So, which I was like, because I know in my work that if someone's not willing, then that's sort of like the prerequisite for any sort of growth or transformation. And what I was hearing was willingness can be a skill, and there is a way to teach willingness through just changing your attitude, thinking differently. There's a few things, but do you think that willingness has something to do also with shifting the impact of, say, the attachment style on, like, say, my capacity to feel? Because I know for me, when I first started feeling, I was 37. I thought that I could feel, I could get emotional, but it actually took me a long time to learn how to feel. And that was really, I mean, I was willing, but do you think that the willingness is something that can shift? Is that one of the things that you would see would actually really be able to shift your capacity to move out of the obstacles?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to name it. Because I think there's two things. I mean, like, one as well is we can't neglect personality type either. Like, so say, for example, like feeling for me was hard because it's not naturally where my personality type would go. Like, I went to a cranial therapist, or I go every couple of weeks. But when I went for the first time, she was like, I don't explain this way to everybody, but like, that's kind of how you are. And I was like, yeah. So people would say, you know, oh, you should go to such and such, they're brilliant. They may be brilliant, but if they can't explain to me what they're doing to me, or why we're doing it, or the connections around it, I need to have that scaffolding for me to feel safe. But that's a personality thing, not an attachment thing. And the willingness is great. It's bang on, I think, Lisa. And I wonder, is there a gradient before even willingness where it's awareness? You know, when people feel the feeling and can just busy themselves ignoring that feeling, or you know, I suppose to bring it back to maybe attachment and the feminine force is like, as mother-daughters, what are we teaching our children around patriarchal relationships, whether it's romantically or in the workplace, because girls growing into women come in a submissive position in all of those. And that's really challenging for girls. So say I would have girls in a group who are insecure, say, for example, they might have secure attachment, and they're teens and they're going into relationships. And one was on her phone, like, all the time. And I was like, I'm fine with you being on your phone. You know, if this is what you choose to do, it's my job to be engaging enough that you'd put the phone down. So that's up to you. And she was like, oh, well, I have a new boyfriend and, you know, he keeps texting me. And I was like, that's okay. I was like, did you tell him that you're coming here today? And she was like, yeah, I did. But he wants to talk to me now. He knows I'm here. And so you're trying to pull that out and go, okay, well, let's keep that completely separate and look at what does it mean for you as a girl, that if he was busy for 3 hours, would you respect that? 100%. But he doesn't respect that you're busy for 3 hours. Yes, but I'm obliged as his girlfriend to be available to him when he needs me.
Yeah.
So it was just an example, a very innocent example, but it is permeated throughout those relationships, and also in the workplace. We're seeing this all the time where women are picking up extra workloads or not having career progression or anything like that, because there's a deep-seated man is better, man is worth more, man, you know, needs more. And
I would think actually, Grainne, is that something to do with our nurturing side though as well? Because I had this conversation with my sister-in-laws actually last week only, and one's from New York, one in Ireland, you know, and they're both very, you know, I suppose in professional roles and whatever, you know, and they were talking about stories from work as well. And it seemed to be a pattern actually, that this over responsibility and this actually wanting to help and this kind of innate kind of nurturing and wanting to be of help and to serve and getting actually, like I think you've talked about, Grainne, as well, like maybe we're getting a hit from like this, we're naturally biologically, you know, created to want to kind of nurture, satisfy, you know, that in the workplace, if we're not aware of that, that can be manipulated, and that we don't have as much boundaries around that for ourselves, you know, that I thought was interesting in that conversation as well, that, you know, that's been passed on to into our daughters, no matter how much education they get or how high they go, if it's still that pattern and we're not aware of it, that's being manipulated, or that if we're not aware of that, we can tend to give too much without receiving. You know, it's interesting actually, you know, and I know you talked about like I suppose what happens chemically in our bodies, like, you know, we're naturally kind of programmed to want to do that. So maybe is that something to do with it, you think?
I do think there's the neuroscience and the chemicals, because neurologically, boys and girls, like, they develop differently and are wired slightly differently. So that emotional pathway and those interpersonal skills develop later for boys. And obviously women have more oxytocin. So that is the whole disease to please, you call it, you know, like that actually, you know, chemically we are wired that way. But I suppose it's the same as anything, like there's different levels in different people, but there is still a mother-daughter, you know, as you said before, like the mother is the supermodel, you know, so there is this mother-daughter role modeling.
Yeah.
That, you know, monkey see, monkey do. So it's more than the talk. It's walking the walk that way. So you may act like the feminine force, but if you're not behaving, you know, maybe talking that way, if you're not actually behaving that way, that is that conflictual message for your daughter to go, well, I'll do the same. I'll talk the talk, but I won't walk the walk, because it's more important to be in the relationship. It's more important to be liked. You know, we see that a lot, not just with romantic relationships, but in friends groups or anything like that. It's like, just be liked, just get on, just, you know, don't be different, don't be political. you know, don't be too opinionated. You know, there's still a huge amount of role modeling that. Yeah. So it is back to Lisa's point around, where's the willingness of the feminist force? Like, how willing and how far are we prepared to go?
Yeah. And I wonder what cracks that open, you know, like it's interesting, like whether is it the willingness for change, as I call it, like one of the poems I have, like called it, you know, the intimacy lives between. And it's kind of like, if you see a benefit, like if women can see a benefit, I think, like, you know, kind of feeding into like the larger picture of like, if you are become aware, like you said, Grainne, about the fact that we are modeling that to our daughters. So then the awareness, if the awareness is there, then the willingness might grow from that. Because then if we really become really aware that our actions are being mirrored constantly, then the willingness for change can enter that. I'm going to take responsibility for that, you know, because it takes effort to make change, you know, and it takes a consistent effort, you know, to be willing to change on a daily basis, to change patterns and to change behaviors, doesn't it?
And I think mother-daughters have more challenges ahead of them, not just in their own internal dynamic, but like that those external influences impact that. And as we spoke about before about the mother's own healing, so the bias that's there. I think I spoke before about my son and daughter are in the exact same secondary school, very small, same number of teachers, you know, similar teachers, and they're both, you know, popular and high grades and well behaved and fine. But the gender bias in the reporting from the teachers was huge. You know, with my daughter, it was like, yes, she's very hardworking and she's, you know, she's kind of quiet in class and blah, blah, blah. Normal kind of academic-y stuff, recommendations after that. But with my son, it was like, he's very well-mannered. She's been in the school 5 years. They never said she had good manners. She does have good manners, but it was exceptional that he was polite and had good manners. And he's not exceptionally polite at all.
And she's been seen as being quiet and shy, you know, kind of thing nearly.
Yeah. And in fact, that's not how they would present in the world really at all. But there was this bias that the teachers were coming to and their expectation of a male student and their expectation of a female student. And again, it's expectation of a male athletic student. Still, like even in Ireland, I was really quite surprised. Still, the grandiose that comes with that and how popular he is with the teaching staff and the principal as a result of that as well. So there was a huge bias. Like there was an issue with my daughter just after Christmas, and my ex-husband rang up to school say, like, you know, oh, there's a big problem with, you know, Tara and her mother, and this is very traumatizing for her, and I'm very concerned, and blah blah blah. And so the school got on to me to say, look, we're in the situation, Tara's father's after ringing, all that. And I was like, oh, absolutely no sensitivity. I said, really just say what you have to say, because it's only what's in the best interest of the child. And we need to work through this. And he said, well, should we offer any additional supports? I said, absolutely, you should offer additional supports. We continued talking, and I said, would you consider offering additional supports to my son also, who's going through the same stuff? And he's like, oh, no, I wouldn't be comfortable saying that. He's like, sure, he looks great and he's an amazing footballer, and I don't think there's any problem there.
Wow, yeah.
So it was just immediate that, and certainly, you know, I think what that bias brings up as well is that girls need to be fixed. Boys do not need to be fixed. As well, you know, that was kind of the narrative that came with that. Mum needs to be fixed, dad doesn't need to be fixed, daughter needs to be fixed, son doesn't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
You know, and I think
Yeah, go ahead. But they're actually, that really comes back to emotions again, doesn't it? Because they're presenting with some kind of feeling about something, so they need to be fixed. You know, it's amazing.
But I think as girls and women, we tend to do that as well.
Yeah.
Anyways, whether that's chemically or neurologically, that it's like, what's wrong with me? And I think that's not the right question to ask. It's like, what am I learning? What am I growing into? What am I healing from? But our default tends to be, oh, what's wrong with me? What have I done wrong? And that's a very feminine thing, which I'd like to change.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I do think that's we're almost getting to the end of our time, but I just have to say that really is such an impetus to want to change when you know that how you stand in your personal power impacts your daughter. Like if there's anything that would drive me to make a change and to look at myself and to look at my behaviors, it's actually making sure that my daughter has an awareness around what's possible for her and the potential that's possible for her, you know, because that is like incredible leverage, not only to free myself, but to free future generations. And especially of that, Grainne, like that attitude, the more aware I am, because I've been pulled up by my daughters. Like I've done things from my conditioned response, and my 24-year-old daughter will go, Mum, that's not right. And I go, I didn't even see it, right? I didn't even see it because of my conditioned programming. But when she pointed it out, I thought, oh my God, like she's right. And I just didn't see that behavior was inappropriate by that man because of my conditioned programming. You know, and I'm just like, it is amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's like a blinkers on. And like Lauren's the same, she puts me up on things all the time. And I'm really grateful for that. Because like I was that fiery teenager, you know, and where did she go? You know what I mean? Like, she was like, you know, and it's kind of like they're only our hope really, you know, to kind of pull that, to do the archaeology, you know. And
I think we need each other, don't we?
Yeah,
like I think that's I feel so we do. We need each other. We have to wake up, and our daughters, like we're waking each other up, and like that's the power. That's where the power is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very exciting and amazing, Grainne. Thank you so much for coming on. Like that was, it's just fantastic.
Thank you, Grainne.
Always great to have the chats. I kind of forget that we're recording at all. I'm always just like, oh, so great to chat to Lisa and Caroline. You know, I love it. Explore new things.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you, Grainne. It was so good. And thank you everyone for listening and joining us again. Look forward to seeing you again on our next live.
Absolutely. And Sharon Chamello was on there. Wonderful chat. She said, thank you so much, Sharon. And yeah, absolutely wonderful. We'd have you on again, Grainne, I'm sure, to talk about another topic. Thanks for to take time out of your busy schedule. And you can put your high heels back on now and go back to work. Okay.
Thanks, Grainne.
All right. Bye-bye.
See you, Lisa. See you, everybody. Talk to you again. See you. Bye.